The transport bay smelled like ozone and regret. Captain Sarah Chen watched as the Krell delegation descended their boarding ramp, their crystalline exoskeletons clicking against the metal deck. Behind them, moving with deliberate slowness, came their offering. He was massive. Even hunched as he was, the Krell warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall. His carapace was a deep amber, shot through with veins of gold that pulsed with bioluminescence. But it was his wings that made Sarah's breath catch. 4 of them, translucent and gossamer thin, folded so tightly against his back that she could see the individual wing ribs trembling. They were bound, not with rope or metal, but with some kind of resinous material that looked organic, almost alive. It covered the wing joints, sealed them shut, and even from across the bay, Sarah could see how the binding had started to grow into his flesh. "For your valor at the Sigma offensive," the Krell matriarch announced, her translator rendering her chittering into clipped, formal English. "We present you with warrior poet Zhen'tak. May his service honor your achievement." Sarah's XO, Commander Martinez, stood rigid beside her. The rest of her senior staff maintained diplomatic faces. Earth had been part of the Galactic Assembly for less than a decade. The Krell were powerful allies. This was supposed to be an honor. "I don't accept," Sarah said flatly. The silence was immediate and absolute. Even the constant hum of the station's life support seemed to pause. "Captain," Martinez hissed. Protocol can wait." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes locked on the bound warrior. "Why is he restrained?" The matriarch's antennae twitched, confusion or irritation, Sarah wasn't sure. "He is dangerous, Captain. Surely you understand. A Krell warrior in battle prime is a weapon of considerable destruction. The bindings protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From his nature." The matriarch moved closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Zhen'tak is one of our finest warriors. 37 confirmed victories in single combat, but he is also troubled. He composes poetry, Captain, in battle. He questions orders. He mourns enemies." "Such things are," she paused, searching for the word, "inefficient." Sarah looked at the warrior again. His head was still bowed, but she could see his compound eyes tracking her movement. Intelligent eyes, aware eyes. "So you're giving me a soldier you consider defective." "We are giving you a warrior who needs purpose that our society cannot provide. Among your kind, perhaps his peculiarities will be assets rather than liabilities." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd read about the Krell's caste system. Warriors who couldn't conform were dealt with, usually permanently. "If I refuse," the matriarch's silence was answer enough. "Fine," Sarah said. "I accept, but those bindings come off. Now, Captain, that would be most unwise. Those come off." Sarah met the matriarch's multifaceted gaze, "or we don't have a deal." The delegation conferred in rapid clicks and whistles. Finally, the matriarch approached the warrior and touched something at the base of his wing joints. The resin began to dissolve, smoking slightly as it fell away in chunks. The warrior, Zhen'tak, made a sound. Low, almost subsonic. Pain or relief, Sarah couldn't tell. "He is yours, Captain. May you find his service satisfactory." The matriarch and her delegation retreated up their ramp with unseemly haste. Sarah waited until their ship had cleared the bay before approaching. Up close, Zhen'tak was even more imposing. The spaces where the binding had been were raw, weeping a clear fluid. "Can you understand me?" she asked. His wings twitched, a small movement, but she saw him wince. "Yes." His voice was surprisingly soft, musical almost, though his translator gave it a synthetic edge. "You are Captain Sarah Chen, architect of the Sigma victory, destroyer of the Vrex battle group, hero of—" "Just Sarah is fine. She studied the wounds on his wing joints. Those need medical attention. They will heal. My kind regenerates efficiently. That's not the point." She pulled out her comm. "Chen to medical, I need a xenobiology team in Transport Bay 3, Krell Physiology." She paused, "and tell them to bring something for pain." Zhen'tak's antennae rose slightly. "You wish to ease my pain? You're hurt, so yeah." She glanced at Martinez, who looked like he'd swallowed something sour. "Commander, find our guest quarters, somewhere with high ceilings." "Captain, perhaps the brig would be more—" "Guest quarters, Martinez. That's an order." 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in the medical bay, watching Dr. Okafor work on Zhen'tak's wings with careful precision. The Krell warrior sat perfectly still, but Sarah could see the tension in his carapace. The binding was designed to be permanent, Dr. Ockhaffer said, not looking up from her work. It's integrated with his nervous system. I can remove it, but it's going to take time, and it's going to hurt. How much time? Sarah asked. Weeks, maybe months. Zhen'tak spoke, his voice strained. Do not trouble yourself, doctor. I am accustomed to pain. Nobody should be accustomed to this. Ockhaffer applied something that made the warrior's wings flutter involuntarily. Captain, I'm going to need to keep him here overnight, maybe longer. Whatever you need, Doc. Sarah moved to where Zhen'tak could see her. I'm going to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Do you want to be here? His compound eyes seemed to shift focus. My wants are irrelevant, Captain. I am Krell. I am a warrior. I serve. That's not what I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Then no one has asked me what I want since my first molt. I was 6 cycles old. I said I wanted to write poetry. My clutch mother burned my wings for the first time that day to teach me that wanting was weakness. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Jesus Christ. An earth deity, yes, I have read about your religions. Fascinating how many of them center on suffering and redemption. You've studied human culture? I have studied many cultures. The matriarch found this disturbing. Warriors should know only battle, she said, but I could not help myself. Words are as beautiful as violence, Captain, sometimes more so. Dr. Ockhaffer looked up, her expression carefully neutral. Captain, maybe you should let me work. Sarah nodded but paused at the door. Zhen'tak. When you're healed, we'll talk about what happens next, but you're not a prisoner here, and you're not property, understood? His wings, all 4 of them, trembled. I do not understand you, Captain. Yeah, Sarah said softly. I'm getting that a lot lately. The next morning, Sarah found Zhen'tak in the observation deck. Dr. Ockhaffer had cleared him with strict instructions to rest, but the Krell warrior stood before the viewport, staring at the stars. His wings were partially unfurled now, the damage visible in the torn membranes and the scars where the binding had been. Couldn't sleep? Sarah asked. Krell do not sleep as humans do. We enter a rest state for 3 hours every 40. I am. He paused, restless. She moved to stand beside him. Outside, a patrol ship drifted past, its running lights blinking against the darkness. I have never seen my wings fully extended, Zhen'tak said quietly. Not since my second molt. They bound them when I was declared battle-ready at 8 cycles. I do not know if they still function. Doc says they should once the healing is complete, and if they do not, what use is a flightless Krell? Sarah crossed her arms. What use is a wingless human? We do fine. Humans were not born with wings. We were. To be Krell without flight is to be. He struggled with the word, incomplete. You're a poet, Sarah said. Seems pretty complete to me. His antennae twitched amusement she was learning. The matriarch would disagree. Poetry is for the contemplative caste. Warriors who compose verse are aberrations. The matriarch isn't here, I am. She turned to face him fully. And I'm telling you that on my ship you can be whatever you want to be. Warrior, poet, both, neither. Your choice. Choice. He said the word like it was foreign. I have composed 17,000 poems, Captain, all in my head, all in secret. To write them down would have meant death. Then maybe it's time to write them down. He looked at her, his compound eyes reflecting the starlight. Why? Why do you care what becomes of a broken Krell warrior? Because I've seen enough people broken by systems that don't give a damn about them, and I'm tired of it. Sarah's voice was harder than she intended. The Sigma offensive. You know what our glorious victory was? Sending kids, 18, 19-year-old kids, into a meat grinder because some admiral decided a strategic position was worth more than their lives. I got a medal for keeping more of them alive than expected. Like that's something to celebrate. She took a breath. So yeah, I care because someone should, and because maybe if I can do one decent thing in this whole screwed-up galaxy, it'll balance out some of the terrible ones. Zhen'tak was silent. Then slowly he unfurled one wing. It shook with the effort, and she could see the pain it cost him, but he held it extended. In my culture, he said softly, to show one's wings to another is an act of profound trust. They are our most vulnerable point. To expose them is to say, I believe you will not harm me. Sarah felt the weight of the gesture. I won't, you have my word. Then I will try, Captain, I will try to choose. Over the next weeks, Sarah watched Zhen'tak transform. It was subtle at first, the way he held himself a little straighter, how he started asking questions instead of just following orders. Dr. Ockhaffer cleared him for light duty, and Sarah assigned him to the Strategic Planning Division. The other officers didn't know what to make of him. Commander Martinez remained skeptical. Lieutenant Shaw from Tactical treated him like a ticking bomb. But Lieutenant Park from Communications started bringing him human poetry, Rumi, Neruda, Whitman. Zhen'tak devoured it all. "This Whitman," Zhen'tak said one day in Sarah's office, holding a battered paper book like it was sacred. "He writes of the self as containing multitudes, of contradiction as natural state. This is revolutionary." Sarah smiled. "Revolutionary is one word for it. My grandmother used to say Whitman was aggressively authentic. Pissed off a lot of people in his time." As all true poets must. Zhen'tak's antennae quivered with what she'd learned was excitement. "Captain, I have been writing. Dr. Ockhaffer gave me a data pad. I have been writing everything I remember and new things too. Would you?" He hesitated. "Would you like to read some?" "I'd be honored." He transferred a file to her console. Sarah opened it, found herself reading lines that were simultaneously alien and achingly human. "In the silence between battles, I counted the stars and found them wanting. Each light a life, I'd ended each darkness, a question I feared to ask, they bound my wings to make me whole. But I was only ever fragments held together by duty and fear, and the desperate hope that somewhere in the vast and empty black something might recognize." The shape of my unspoken name, Sarah read it twice, 3 times. "Zhen'tak, this is beautiful. It is inadequate. I lack the words to properly express. It's beautiful," she repeated firmly. "And you should share it with the crew, hell, with everyone." His wings drooped. "I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of being seen, truly seen. The Krell bound my wings, but I bound myself, Captain. I hid what I was because showing it meant death. Even here, even safe, the fear remains." Sarah stood, moved around her desk. "Can I tell you something? When I was 15, I wrote a song about losing my dad in the Mars colony riots. It was raw, honest, probably terrible musically, but it was real, and I played it at the memorial service. What happened? Half the people cried, the other half said I was being inappropriate, making it about me instead of him. I didn't write another song for 10 years. She met his eyes. But I wish I had, because that song was true. And truth is worth the risk of being seen." Zhen'tak extended one wing, then another. They were healing well, Dr. Ockhaffer had said. Another few weeks and he could try to fly. "You speak from pain," he said. "I recognize it. We are alike in this, perhaps. Maybe. Or maybe we're just two beings trying to figure out how to live with what we've done and what's been done to us." "I would like to share my words," Zhen'tak said suddenly, "but I do not know how." Sarah smiled. "Leave that to me." The poetry reading in the crew lounge was Sarah's idea. She'd made it optional, but most of the crew showed up anyway, some out of curiosity, some because they'd started to like the strange Krell warrior who helped them solve tactical problems and occasionally quoted Rumi in the mess hall. Zhen'tak stood before them, all 4 wings fully extended for the first time since his arrival. The membranes caught the light, casting prismatic shadows across the walls. "I am Zhen'tak," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his wings. "I am a warrior of the Krell Collective. I have killed 37 opponents in single combat. I have led successful campaigns on 4 worlds, and I am afraid." He paused, his antennae sweeping the room. "I am afraid that what I am about to share will diminish me in your eyes. That you will see me as weak, as broken, as less than what a warrior should be. But Captain Chen has taught me that being seen, truly seen, is worth the fear. So I will share with you words I have carried in secret for most of my life. And I will trust that you will not harm me with your judgment." He began to recite, not just the poem Sarah had read, but others. Verses about battle and beauty, about the loneliness of violence, about the weight of wings that could not fly. His voice rose and fell like music, the translator struggling to capture the rhythm and cadence of Krell poetry. When he finished, the silence was profound. Then Lieutenant Park started clapping. Others joined. Within moments, the entire crew was on their feet applauding. Zhen'tak's wings trembled. Sarah could see the clear fluid leaking from his eyes, Krell tears, she'd learned. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming emotion. After, when the crew had filtered out with quiet words of appreciation, Sarah found him standing alone, his wings now folded. "You did it," she said simply. "I did." His voice was thick, "and I am still whole, perhaps more whole than before. That's how it works sometimes." He turned to her. "Captain, I need to tell you something. Dr. Ockhaffer believes my wings are healed enough to fly. She wishes to test them tomorrow in the main hangar bay." "That's great news." "Yes and no." His antennae drooped. "If I can fly, truly fly, then I am capable, complete. The Krell will have no reason to leave me in your care. They may demand my return." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She hadn't thought about that. "Would you go? If ordered, I would have no choice." "That's not what I asked. Would you want to go?" Zhen'tak was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Sarah had never seen a Krell do. He knelt, lowering himself so they were eye level. "When the matriarch bound my wings, she told me it was mercy. That a warrior who could not conform deserved death, but my battle record had earned me the right to serve in chains instead. I believed her. I believed I was broken. I believed that pain was the price of existence." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "And then you removed my chains and told me to choose. You asked what I wanted. You treated my words as valuable. You made me believe that perhaps I was not broken at all. Perhaps I was simply free." He extended one wing, touched it gently to Sarah's shoulder, a Krell gesture of deep respect. "I do not want to return to the collective, Captain. I want to stay here with you, with this crew, in this place where I am allowed to be all the things I am. Warrior and poet, killer and creator, afraid and brave." His compound eyes met hers. "But I do not know if that choice is mine to make." Sarah put her hand over the wing, touching her shoulder, felt the delicate strength of it. "Then we'll make it yours. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out. Together." "Together," Zhen'tak repeated. "Another word I am learning to love." The next morning, the main hangar bay had been cleared. Dr. Ockhaffer had set up monitoring equipment. Half the crew had found excuses to be present, lining the upper observation galleries. Zhen'tak stood in the center of the empty space, his wings unfurled. Sarah could see them trembling. "Whenever you're ready," Dr. Ockhaffer called from her station. "Captain," Zhen'tak said, "if I fall, you won't. But if I do, then I'll catch you. That's what friends do." His antennae perked up. "Friends? You got a problem with that?" "No, no problem." And despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the audience watching his potential failure, Zhen'tak's mandibles curved in what Sarah had learned was a Krell's smile. He began to move his wings. Slowly at first, testing the muscles that hadn't been used in decades. The movement was awkward, uncoordinated. But then something clicked. Muscle memory or instinct or pure determination, Sarah couldn't say. But suddenly Zhen'tak was lifting off the deck, rising into the air. He was clumsy. He wobbled and dipped and nearly crashed into a support beam. But he was flying. The crew erupted in cheers. Sarah found herself grinning like an idiot, her heart pounding with second-hand joy. Zhen'tak flew higher, growing more confident. He executed a loop, imperfect but unmistakable. And then he was descending, landing with a grace that suggested his wings remembered even if he didn't. He folded all four wings carefully and looked at Sarah with something like wonder. "I flew," he said simply. "You flew," she confirmed. "For cycles, I believed I would never know this feeling. I had resigned myself to being forever grounded, forever incomplete, and now." He extended his wings again, stretching them wide. "Now I know. I am not broken, Captain. I was never broken. I was merely waiting." Dr. Ockhaffer approached, her scanner showing readings Sarah couldn't interpret but which clearly pleased the doctor. Full function restored. "You're cleared for active flight status, Zhen'tak. Congratulations." "Thank you, Doctor, for your skill and your kindness." As the crew dispersed and the bay returned to normal operations, Sarah found herself alone with Zhen'tak again. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now we wait and see if the Krell make demands, and if they do." Sarah set her jaw. "We fight, diplomatically, legally, whatever it takes. You've earned the right to choose your own path. The Krell Collective is powerful. Earth is still a junior member of the Assembly. If they insist, then they'll learn something about humans," Sarah interrupted. "We don't handle people like property, and we sure as hell don't give up on our people without a fight." "Your people," Zhen'tak repeated softly. "You include me in that?" Have since day one, just took you a while to catch up. The message from the Krell matriarch came 3 days later. Sarah read it twice, her expression growing darker with each pass. They want you back, she told Zhen'tak in her office. They're calling it reclamation of defective military asset, saying that now you've been repaired, you can resume proper service. Then I will go. Like hell you will. Captain, you cannot defy the collective on my behalf. The political ramifications are my problem, not yours. Sarah stood, began pacing. There has to be a loophole, some regulation or precedent we can use. There is not. Zhen'tak's wings drooped. Krell law is clear, warriors belong to the collective, personal choice is not recognized. Then Krell law is wrong, perhaps. But wrong or right, it is law. Sarah stopped pacing, struck by a sudden thought. What if you weren't Krell? I am confused, Captain. Legally, I mean, what if you renounced your citizenship, became a human citizen instead? Zhen'tak's antennae shot up. Is such a thing possible? I don't know, but I'm about to find out. She opened a comm channel. Chen to command, get me the Judge Advocate General, priority channel. The legal battle took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of depositions, arguments, precedent searches, and increasingly heated diplomatic exchanges. The Krell Collective insisted that Zhen'tak was property. Earth's legal team argued that sentient beings could not be property under human law. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Park's research into interstellar citizenship protocols revealed a century-old treaty clause. Any sentient being serving aboard a human vessel could apply for citizenship after 6 months of service in good standing. Zhen'tak had been aboard for 4 months. 2 more months, Sarah told him. You just need to stay 2 more months and we can process your application. The Krell will not wait 2 months, Captain. They are already threatening economic sanctions. Let them threaten. Earth's gotten good at standing on principle, even when it costs us. But the pressure mounted. The Krell cut trade agreements. They withdrew support from joint military operations. Earth's government, still finding its footing in galactic politics, began to waver. Sarah received the order on a Tuesday morning, surrender Zhen'tak to Krell custody within 72 hours. She read it 3 times, felt something cold and furious settle in her chest. Then she deleted it. Captain? Martinez stood in her doorway, looking concerned. Command just sent. I know what they sent. You're going to ignore a direct order. I'm going to do what's right. There's a difference. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, sharp and dangerous. Going to need plausible deniability, ma'am. For the record, I strongly objected to your plan. What plan? Exactly. Zhen'tak was in his quarters, small but high-ceilinged, with viewports he'd covered in handwritten poetry when Sarah arrived. Pack your things, she said without preamble. He looked up from the data pad where he'd been writing. Captain. We have 68 hours before the Krell boarding party arrives. We're going to make them count. I do not understand. Sarah sat down across from him. I'm taking you to Earth, to the Refugee Review Board. It's a long shot, but if we can prove you're fleeing persecution, which you are, they might grant you asylum, and asylum supersedes extradition. This will end your career. Probably, the Krell will be furious. Almost certainly, you could face court-martial. Yep. Sarah met his eyes. And I'm doing it anyway, because you're my friend, because you deserve better, because someone has to draw a line somewhere, and apparently that someone is me. Zhen'tak's wings unfurled slowly, trembling. Captain, I cannot ask you to sacrifice. You're not asking, I'm offering. Big difference. She stood. Now pack, we leave in an hour. They took a small courier ship, fast, maneuverable, and technically on assignment delivering classified documents to Earth Command. The fact that those documents were routine supply requisitions was between Sarah and God. Lieutenant Park came with them. Someone needs to navigate, she said, grinning. And I've always wanted to see Earth. The 3-day journey gave Zhen'tak time to write. He filled data pads with poetry, with observations, with the story of his transformation from bound warrior to free being. Sarah watched him work and felt the rightness of her choice settle into her bones. They landed on Earth in the middle of a thunderstorm. Zhen'tak stood at the viewport, watching rain hammer against the hull with something like awe. Water falling from the sky, he murmured. I had read of it, but to see it. Wait until you see the ocean, Park said. The Refugee Review Board hearing took place in a small office in Geneva before 3 judges who looked thoroughly overwhelmed by the situation. Sarah testified first, laying out Zhen'tak's history. The binding, the persecution for his nature, the threat of forcible return to a system that had already nearly destroyed him. Then Zhen'tak spoke. He recited his poetry. He showed the scars where his wings had been bound. He explained in careful, measured words what it meant to finally be free. "If I return to the collective," he said, "they will bind my wings again. They will punish me for the crime of choosing. They will make me forget that I was ever allowed to be whole. And I will not go back to that half-existence. I would rather die." The senior judge, an elderly woman with kind eyes, leaned forward. "You understand that granting you asylum will have significant political ramifications, that it may damage Earth's relationship with the Krell collective." "I understand. And I am sorry for the trouble my existence causes." "Don't be," the judge said. "Existence is never something to apologize for." She looked at her colleagues, seemed to come to some internal decision. "We'll have our ruling in 24 hours. They stayed in a small hotel near the hearing center. Sarah barely slept, running through contingency plans in her head. Park dozed on the couch. Zhen'tak stood at the window all night, watching the city lights and the rain. "Sarah," he said quietly just before dawn. She sat up. "Yeah. Whatever happens today, I want you to know you gave me something I thought I'd lost. Hope. The belief that I could be more than what I was made to be." His wings rustled softly. "I will carry that with me even if I must return." "You're not going back," Sarah said fiercely. "I won't let them take you. You may not have a choice. There's always a choice, you taught me that." At 900 hours, they returned to the hearing room. The 3 judges looked tired but resolute. "We have reviewed your case," the senior judge began. "And we find that Zhen'tak of the Krell Collective has demonstrated credible fear of persecution based on his fundamental nature. Furthermore, we find that returning him to Krell custody would constitute a violation of basic sentient rights as recognized under human law." Sarah felt her heart start to pound. "Therefore, we grant asylum. Effective immediately, Zhen'tak is under the protection of Earth's refugee protocols. Any attempt to forcibly remove him will be considered an act of aggression against human sovereignty." Zhen'tak made a sound, high and keening and utterly alien. His wings unfurled to their full span, nearly knocking over a chair. "You're safe," Sarah said, and found her vision blurring with tears. "You're safe. I am free," Zhen'tak whispered, "truly free." The political fallout was exactly as bad as expected. The Krell severed most diplomatic ties. Earth took an economic hit. Sarah was recalled to command and faced a board of inquiry, but she didn't face it alone. Her entire crew testified on her behalf. Lieutenant Park presented evidence of the illegal orders Sarah had deleted. Commander Martinez, in a stunning display of selective memory, claimed he had no recollection of anything unusual happening. And Zhen'tak stood before the admirals and generals and told them exactly what Sarah Chen had given him, a chance to be whole. In the end, Sarah was formally reprimanded and quietly promoted. "For exemplifying the best of human values in difficult circumstances," the citation read. She suspected someone high up had a sense of irony. She found Zhen'tak on the observation deck of her new command, a larger ship, with better quarters and a proper literary database that Park had already filled with Earth poetry from every culture and era. "You should be celebrating," he said, not looking away from the stars. "You kept your career, you won." "We won," Sarah corrected. She moved to stand beside him. "How are you doing, really?" "I am." He paused, his antennae quivering, terrified, joyful, free. "All of these things at once, is that normal? For someone who just completely rebuilt their life, yeah, that's pretty normal." "I have been writing," he said, "about all of this, about you. Would you like to hear?" "Always." He didn't pull out a data pad, just recited from memory. "She came to me wrapped in duty and found me wrapped in chains. She asked not what I could do, but who I wished to become. She fought armies and laws and stars not for glory or gain, but because she believed that I was worth the trouble of existing, and in believing she taught me to believe it too." Sarah found her throat tight. "That's beautiful. It is inadequate. You deserve epics, Captain, songs that span generations. But I am still learning how to write about joy instead of pain." You've got time, Sarah said. All the time you need. Zhen'tak's wings rustled, catching the starlight. I have been offered a position. Professor Park says Earth's universities would like someone to teach comparative literature. Galactic poetry. I would live on Earth, study human culture properly. That sounds perfect for you. Yes, but I would be leaving the ship, leaving. He trailed off. Leaving me? Sarah smiled. Zhen'tak, I didn't fight for your freedom so you could spend it following me around. If you want to teach, teach. If you want to explore Earth, explore. If you want to write poetry on a mountaintop somewhere, do that. You're free, act like it. Will I see you again? Of course, I'll visit when I'm on leave. You'll probably get sick of me showing up unannounced. She bumped her shoulder against his thorax gently. Besides, someone needs to make sure you're eating enough. Do Krell poets remember to eat? I feel like that's a universal problem. He made that chittering sound she'd learned was laughter. I will miss you, Captain. Sarah, when I'm planetside, it's just Sarah. Sarah, he said carefully, like he was tasting the word. I will miss you, Sarah, friend. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel past. And Sarah thought about beginnings and endings, about chains broken and wings spread, about the strange and winding path that had brought them both here. Hey, Zhen'tak? Yes, thank you. For what? For being brave enough to choose, for trusting me to help you, for reminding me why I do this job in the first place. She smiled. For being my friend. His wings extended fully, not in display or threat, but in simple, unguarded joy. The honor, he said softly, is entirely mine. 6 months later, Sarah received a package. Inside was a book, actual paper, bound in something that looked like Krell silk. The title page read, The Weight of Wings, Poetry by Zhen'tak. Dedicated to Sarah Chen, who taught me that freedom is not the absence of chains, but the courage to choose what binds us. She opened it to a random page and read. I was born with wings, but learned to walk instead. I was taught that wanting was weakness. That choice was chains, that to be different was to deserve erasure. And then one day a human with kind eyes and stubborn heart looked at me and asked, What do you want? And I learned that the heaviest chains are the ones we accept as natural. That the highest flight comes from choosing to try even when falling seems certain, especially. Then Sarah closed the book carefully, reverently. And when she next had leave, she took it with her to Earth, to a small university town where a Krell poet was teaching students about the power of words. They sat together in his office, high-ceilinged and covered in poetry from a dozen worlds, and talked about freedom and friendship and the strange, beautiful journey they'd shared. And Zhen'tak's wings, fully healed and stronger than ever, cast dancing shadows on the walls.